Hello and welcome to the fifth video in the Introduction to Unity tutorials. So, in this one we're going to use the things that we've learnt from the first few videos, so navigating our scene, adding new objects to our scene, placing them within our scene, and then adding components to them to create an interesting interaction. In this case, we're just going to create a simple Dominoes-like interaction using the physics system and the components that we've already learnt about. So, to start off, let's click in our hierarchy scene, right click, 3D object, and create a plane. Now, remembering good practice is starting at world 0, so we're going to click on our plane, come over here to position, and make that 0 on the X, 0 on the Y, 0 on the Z axis. I'm also going to rotate our sun a little bit so everything's not so white. So clicking on our object, clicking rotate in the top left here, or pressing E to bring up the rotate gizmo, just rotate that down a little bit. Okay, so what do we need to create a Dominoes-like interaction? First of all, we're going to need a domino. So what's a domino? It is just a cuboid, stretched cuboid. So we're going to create a cube. We will move that down a little bit so it's sitting almost on the ground, and using our scale, so we can press R to bring up scale, or we can click in the top left hand corner here on this box with the arrows pointing outwards, and let's just scale that so that it's roughly domino size. So just a long, thin cuboid. Okay. Now, remembering from our last video, just about component system, and we used the rigid body component to make it an active physics object. So we're going to do that again here. So remember, if we press play now, nothing's going to happen because that cube doesn't have physics acting upon it. But if we go click on our cube, click add component, go down to physics and click on rigid body, this adds a rigid body component to our object. And now if we come here and press play, we'll notice our cube falls to the ground a little bit. So physics is now acting upon that cube. Alright, now good practice again, and it's always good to get into good practice from the very start. Name your objects. If this object is no longer just a cube and it has a function, in this case it is a domino, let's call it Domino. So we can name it by clicking on it in the hierarchy, right clicking and go to rename, or we can change its name up here in the inspector. So here we go, we've called it Domino. Now I'm going to place this so it's closer to the ground but not intersecting the ground. Alright, so first of all we're going to make a little bit of a domino chain reaction. So let's click on this domino, right click and go to duplicate, or press Ctrl D and then move it a little bit. Do this a few times and we'll just make a little line of dominoes. Now you can rotate them a little bit if you like, so I press the E button there to bring up the rotate gizmo, or you can click on the little circling arrows up here, and I'm just going to rotate that a little bit. Duplicate, move, rotate, not too much so that it still is going to hit the next domino along. Duplicate, move, rotate. Duplicate, move. Okay. Now hit play again. Now they're all just going to sit there because they've got flat bottoms, gravity's pushing them down, and they're against the flat surface, so none of them are going to fall at this stage. Now actually, before we do anything, let's line our camera up. So we can see here I've selected the camera, Bottom right hand side we can see the camera preview, so let's just line that preview up so it frames up our scene nicely. Let's move that in. Going to rotate it down a little bit. So here I'm just using W to bring up the move gizmo, E to bring up the rotate gizmo, and just framing up the scene a little bit here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we need something force to act upon these dominoes to push them over. So we've got a bunch of other objects that we can use. So we can use a sphere or a ball to hit the first domino and knock the others down. But if we create a sphere, so we'll right click here, go to 3D object, create a sphere, remembering that we need to add a rigid body to that for physics to act upon it. So we select our sphere, come over to our inspector, go to add component, physics, rigid body. Now if we just hit play now, that sphere is going to, bam, fall straight down onto the ground. Not exactly what we want. So what we're going to do is create another cube, but this time we don't want this cube to have a rigid body. We don't want forces to act upon it. We just want it to be something that the ball can collide with, and we'll use it to create a ramp that the ball will roll down into the first domino here. So let's create a ramp. So we've got our cube here. We'll scale it out a little bit so it's nice and wide, plenty of room for the ball to roll down. Let's scale it long ways so the ball has a little bit of a run up. And then let's angle it a little bit so the ball will get a little bit of speed up as it rolls down. Now, something that you'll notice I'm doing here is moving around to the different axes to line this ramp up. It's very hard sometimes to tell if things are lined up exactly in 3D, so it's always a good habit to rotate around to the front face, line it up this way, then rotate around to the side and make sure it's lined up neatly on that side. Might be a little bit too steep there. There you go, so I can pull it back. So it's always good habit to get used to dollying around your object and just checking the alignment on multiple axes. I'll move it across a little bit. Okay, so same thing again with this ball. Let's come around to our front face here. Oh, also another little handy technique or tool. In the top right hand corner here you've got this little gizmo which shows you all of your axes, but if I click on this Z axis here, it'll bring me around to the front. If I click on the X, it'll bring me around to that side. If I click on the Y, it'll bring me around to the top. So that's always handy, so especially if we're lining things up. Let's come around to the X, we'll use that gizmo, line the ball up on this side. So here, it looks like it's lined up nicely, but we'll just double check and come around to the Z. Alright, now it needs to line up with this domino here, so let's do that. Alright, let's run our simulation and see what happens. There we go. The ball fell down, hit the first domino, but the camera's in a bit of a weird spot. So let's bring the camera around. So using move, bring up my rotate tool, rotate it around. If I hold down control while I'm rotating as well, you'll notice here that it snaps to 10-degree sections or segments. And just going to bring that in a little bit. Let's do that. Okay, cool. Alright, now let's hit play. Bam, there you go. You've got a ball hitting your dominoes. Now here's where the fun stuff happens too. Let's grab the ball, let's make it a little bit larger, and let's play with some of the variables here. So let's remember when we added the rigid body, you can see all these numbers and exposed variables. They're called exposed variables. So here on the rigid body you see that it's got mass. Let's try changing the mass of this up to say 10. Now let's hit play again and watch how this interaction changes a little bit. The ball should plow through these first few and keep going because it's much heavier now. Let's change it to 50 and see what happens. So this is some of the fun in Unity. You can just change numbers, you can muck around, and interesting behaviors arrives. That's kind of why I really enjoy experimenting with Unity, especially when you start getting into coding, emergent behaviors and generative systems, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things to be discovered here. There we go. All right, so from here, probably good practice would be start playing around with these dominoes, put them in different formations. Try changing the mass of your dominoes, the mass of your ball. Maybe have multiple balls and ramps. And just get used to generally navigating your scene, positioning objects, and placing things. Yeah, enjoy, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you.